Welcome to Section 1B of 206. I'm Dr. Jamaldeen Abdullahi, the model leader of this particular model. In this particular session, we're going to still continue with our introduction to PHP, but in this model, we'll also be looking at the core PHP programming constructs. We'll look at how we can make decisions in our source code, or how we can do repetitive executions in our source code. So we'll just recap with the comments, and I'll give you a printout of how it should look like in PHP. Then we can quickly go through variable declaration, concatenation of strings. We'll look at the core PHP programming construct like if else, and then if else if. We'll look at the switch statements. These are the decision statements that we use in PHP. We look at assignment and comparison operators. So we also learn how to perform repetitive executions using the while, do while, and the for loops. We'll learn how to create arrays using different approaches. At the same time, access every element in an array, how we can sort the elements that we store in our array, and also convert between arrays and strings. So it's quite a lengthy topic. So comments. As we discussed in the previous slides, we can use double quotes to indicate single comments. So if you look at this one, this code segment prints hello world on the browser. So it means that this will not be executed. At the same time, we can also put our comment by the lines that are supposed to be executed. So in this particular case, echo hello world will be executed, but this will not be executed. Right? So like I said, you need to try as much as possible to comment your source code. It's very, very important in production environment. Also, multiple lines can be coded, can be commented using the / as indicated here. Well, we need to also enable error reporting during development, but you have to try and avoid doing that when you are releasing the software, because you don't want clients of your software to be seeing errors that they are not supposed to see. It can sometimes be annoying. At the same time, if your application is connecting to a database backend, you are definitely telling hackers the structure of your application, and they can easily get into your system. So always remember, when you are going into production, you make sure that you don't enable error reporting. Of course, if you are going to public web hosting, they would have made sure that they would have disabled all those things in the PHP or Apache server configurations, so that your errors will not be visible. So always make sure that you enable error reporting during development, because it helps you debug your source code. Okay. And we do most of this configuration within the php.ini configuration file. And you can get to that one either by just browsing through the XAMPP, or the XAMPP control panel has given us an easy access to most of the configuration files that we'll be interacting with. So for instance, if you come here, if you go to Apache row and you click on config button, it will pop up a menu. In that menu, you can have php.ini. So if you click on the php.ini, it opens up a text file within which you can do your PHP editing. So this is quite handy. You don't need to know where this file is. All that you need to do is come here, you double click that, you click on the config and click on the php.ini, and that will open this file, and you can go and do whatever changes you want to do. In this particular case, I'm just trying to show you where you can enable error reporting. So if you go through that php.ini file down, or you can search for error reporting, and you will see it here. So if you don't want error reporting here, you just set this one to 0. Otherwise, you set it to the various type of error reporting, which is listed above. So like all they'll tell you, this file will tell you what all will do. So you can see that show all errors, warnings, and notices. So if you enable that, and then you have error, then all the errors will be sent to your browser, and you'll be able to see what is wrong with your source code and debug. But when you are going to production, please remember to set this one to 0 so that your errors are not shown to the public. Remember to restart the Apache web server. So this means that anytime you edit your PHP file, php.ini file, to change the configuration, save it and go back and restart your Apache web server. If you don't do that, the Apache is using the previous configuration, and then you will not see the changes that you have made. Also remember to set the error reporting to 0 before publishing the web application. There are some of you are very fan of coding direct on the server, particularly in the production server. This is a wrong practice, but if you are doing that, remember that anytime you finish debugging, go back and set your error reporting to 0 so that you will not be publishing your error to the public. Public hosting or pay hosting does not give you access to the php.ini configuration file. However, they would have made sure that that is properly configured. If it happens it's not properly configured, it is also possible to be able to configure your php.ini file in your PHP scripts at runtime, which we shall look at how to do that. So typically, if you look at this sample PHP source code, we are trying to turn off error reporting in our PHP source code, so that should the public hosting vendor fails to configure the php.ini proper and then exposes your error to the public, your application will take care of that. So we use a PHP function called error reporting function. Then we just pass in a parameter 0 to take care of that. Okay. These are all ways and means we can take care of the errors. You can run these scripts, and then you can observe what output it will give you. And as you can see, the script is properly commented, so you can read the comments, and that will spell out to you what each line of code is doing. So variable declaration, as I explained, variables in PHP do not start with ints as in Java or C or C++, or double as in Java or C or C++, or float. You just have to specify the variable name starting with the $, and PHP will make a decision as to what type of variable it is, depending on the type of variable you assign to the variable. So as we said, concatenation, this is used to put together strings, numbers, and variable names. And this is done by using the period. In the previous slide, I've explained to you how this is used. A typical example, for instance, if you want to output first name in combination with the last name, so you have a variable called first name, which is holding the name Jamaldeen, which is my first name, and you have another variable called last name, which is holding my last name called Abdullah. Now, if I want to print a full name, all that I need to do is to concatenate the two variables. So my full name is going to be first name variable with the concatenation sign, which is dot or period, and the space I want to be between the two names, and then the dots to specify that I'm concatenating this with that. Then once this line is executed, then full name is now going to contain Jamaldeen space Abdullah, and this should echo out the full name. So it's quite handy to use concatenation to echo out whatever text you want to echo out. Now we are going to look at conditionals. Conditionals are decision-making constructs. For instance, if I want to find out whether a student is supposed to get a first class or a second class or a third class, I need to use a conditional. Assuming 3.5 and above is first class. So I'll take the student's cumulated GPA value, and then I'll compare it against 3.6. If it is equal or greater than 3.6, then I'll say the student is a first-class student. Otherwise, he is not a first-class student. So we use these constructs to make decisions in our source code. And they come in different varieties. You have one we call simple if statement. You have if-else statement, and then if-else-if statement. I mean, depending upon the condition within which you find yourself, you may call to bear any of these tools. So the simple if statement just tests a condition to find out whether it's true or false. If the condition is true, then the statement within the block are executed. If the condition is false, the statement within the block are not executed. So just like I want to find out whether the student is a first class or not, all that I will have to say is that if GPA is greater than or equal to 3.5, print out that he's a first student. I don't have to do anything else. So the simple if would have solved that problem for me. There are also situations where you will be compelled to use if-else statement. You want to be able to do something when the condition is true, and then you want to also do something when the condition is false. In this case, we use the if-else statement. Also, there are situations where you want to make multiple conditions. So for instance, I want to be able to grade the student to find out whether the student has an A in a course, a B plus in a course, a B in a course, a C in a course, C plus in a course. So you have a lot of things you want to test for. And to do that, the best tool to use is the if-else-if statement. So I can test to see if the score is greater than 80, then the student has A. Or greater than or equal to 80, the student has A. Else, if the score is greater than or less than 70, the student has B. Else, if the score is less than or so all these possibilities can be solved by this particular tool. So let's look at how that is done in PHP. This is sample code. So in this particular code, the first PHP code is testing for the score to be greater than 89. So let's say a score contains 96. And then we say if the score variable is greater than 89, then echo out. That means print or send to the browser. Grade is A+. Else, say nothing. So else, echo nothing out. This one, I'm doing something when it is true, and I'm also doing something when it is false. Then you can also use the if-else-if statements to do multiple tasks, like echoing out the grade of a particular score. All right, so next is assignment. So assignment in PHP is equal sign. You declare a variable on your left, and then whatever you want to give to the variable comes from your right. In between them is your equal sign. Now, we can also use the operators, arithmetic operators, with the equal sign to be able to do increment or decrement, or multiply or divide or find modulus. So if you look at the first statement, number 1 equals to 96. So this is assignment and not equal sign. So we are just saying that store 96 into the variable number 1. And the next statement is number 1 plus equal 2. This statement is saying that take whatever you have in number 1, which is currently 96, add 2 to it, and store the result back in number 1. So this is typically the straightforward expression here. Number 1 equals to number 1 plus 2. So whatever is in number 1, you add 2 to it and store the result in number 1. This particular long statement could have been written this way, and this is considered faster than that. Same thing we can do for subtraction, we can do for multiplication, we can do for modulus, and then also we can use the equal sign to do assignment for strings. The next thing to look at is comparison and logical operators. Comparison and logical operators. Comparison and logical operators are important in our conditional constructs. Anytime you are bringing if, then you are expected to use any of these things. Either you are using equality, or you are using greater than or less than, or you are using logical operators like AND, or XOR. So all these are supported in PHP. The next is the loops. In everyday programming, we do loops. You want to be able to perform a particular action a number of times, a specified number of times, or a number of times that should be terminated by a condition. And to do this, we use the while loop, the do while loop, or we use the for loop. So the first one we will consider is the while loop. So the while loop will first of all test a condition. So it will test the condition, either say something is equal to or greater than or less than. So once the condition is true, whatever we have within the while loop block will be executed. And if the condition is false, then the while loop will not be executed. For example, this program finds the factorial of a number. The factorial of a number, for instance, n, is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 all the way to n. So if I give you a factorial of 3, the factorial of 3 is equals to 1 times 2 times 3. So our answer would have been what? 6. If you are given a factorial of 4, you are going to have 1 times 2, which is 2, times 3, which is 6, times 4, which is 24. So that's how factorial is calculated. How can we use a loop to do this for us? Because I'm able to do this easy because it's just a very small number. Assuming you have 1,000 and you want to compute factorial of 1,000. You want to compute factorial of 100. So you would have started writing 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 all the way to 100. That is not good. So we use the appropriate programming constructs to do that. In this case, we use the while loop. So we want to find the factorial of 10. So first of all, we store the 10 as a value into the number variable. Then we want to maintain a count because we are going to count from 1 to 10. So first of all, let's store the number into count. And then we initialize a variable called factorial, which is supposed to be the factorial of the number, into 1. And then we go into our while loop. So our while loop is going to test whether count is greater than 0. So long as count is greater than 0, the body of the loop will be executed. If count is equal to 0 or less, then the body of this will not be executed. So here, count is 10 because we assign 10 to count here. So count is at the moment 10. So when we test this condition, count will be greater than 0. So this means that this will resolve to true. So once this is true, then factorial is going to be factorial times count. So this would have been the initial value here, which is 1 times 10. So we are going in the reverse way. 10 times 9 times 8 times 7, all the way to 1. So the first multiplication would have been 1 times 10, which is 10. Then we reduce the count by 1. So minus 1, 1 means reduce the count by 1. Then we come back to the loop and test the count. So this would have been 9 after reducing it by 1. This would be 9. So when we test this one, 9 is still greater than 0. That means that the loop will be executed again. So we'll come here and multiply whatever we have in factorial, which is at the moment 10, by whatever we have in the counts, which is at the moment 9, and store the result in the factorial. Okay, then we reduce the count again. So this process continues until count goes to what? 0. Once count gets to 0, this loop will not be executed again, and then we would have finished computing our factorial, and then we output it as the factorial of this number is factorial. So you can copy this thing, and then, or you can retype this thing in your PHP script and execute it to validate the code. The next construct we'll look at is the do-while loop. The do-while loop says that the loop must be executed first. The loop body must be executed first before we test the condition. So at least the loop is executed once. For the while loop, the loop may not execute at all because the condition is tested before we execute the loop body. So if the condition is false, the loop body is never executed. So we exit here. However, for the do-while loop, the body of the loop is executed first before the condition is tested. So in this particular case, you have to make sure that your conditions are set that the loop body is executed first. Okay. So for instance, this is properly used for convergence tests in mathematics. Okay. So this is a typical example of the do-while loop. We are going to use the same example, but in this case we are implementing, or we are writing the program using the do-while loop. So here we use the same initialization, and then we do our multiplication first, reduce the count, do the testing, then we come back, execute, do the testing, we come back, execute, do the testing. So when we come back here and reduce this count, and this count gets to 0, we test here. So once this count gets to 0 and we test, then the loop will be executed, it will not be executed again. The next other loop construct we will look at is the for loop. The for loop takes in 3 parameters. You have the initial expression, you have the condition, and you have the closing expression. So 3 parameters: initial expression, condition, and then closing expression. Then you have your loop body. So let's look at this example, for instance. In this example, our initial expression is $i equals to 1. So this means that the variable I is initialized to 1. And then the condition to terminate this loop, or to stop executing the loop, is here. So here we are saying that the loop should continue to execute so long as I is less than or equal to 10. If I goes beyond 10, this loop should not execute. But we have to also find a way of pushing the boundary of I until I goes beyond what? 10. If you don't do that, then this loop will continue to execute endlessly and crash your program. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that you have to either always increment or decrement your closing expression to make sure that your loop is finally terminated. So this means that start from 1, execute the loop, come back and increase the I variable by 1, so that means 1 goes to 2. Go and test whether this one goes beyond the value here. If it doesn't, execute the loop, come back and increase the count, test the condition. If it is still less than 10, execute this one. So that is how this is executed. And it is clearly indicated in the flowchart diagram here, right? You initialize, you test the condition. Then if the condition is true, you execute the loop body, you go back and do your you do your increment, and then you test the condition, and then you execute the body until this condition returns false. You will continuously go on this loop, and once it returns false, then you have to exit. So this is a typical example for the for loop. We are using the same example for the factorial of a number. In this case, we are using for loop. So here, my number is assigned to 10. So here, I could put 10, or I put the number variable. And then I have my count, which is initialized to 1. And then I have my closing expression, which is count being incremented by 1. So here, count is initialized to 1. Test against the condition. The condition is true. Do the multiplication. Come and increase the count by 1. Test against the condition. Condition is true. Do the multiplication. Come and increase the count. Test against the condition. True. Do this. So we continue this loop until the count goes beyond number. If count goes beyond number, then it means that we have to exit the loop. And you can try and rewrite all these codes in your PHP script and then test them. Now, the next interesting construct we will look at is the switch statement. The switch statement is a multi-value testing statement. So when a multi-way if-else statement has many possible outcomes, it can be hard to read. If the choice is based on the value of an integer or character expression, the switch statement can make your code easier to understand. So here, if you have multiple conditions, writing if else can be cumbersome and it can be frustrating. So the best tool to tackle that is the switch, particularly if your switch value is a numeric value or it is a character. So if your condition has to do with less than or greater than, this is not the best tool for it. You'll have to fall on your if-else if statement. But if it is an integer value, then, or a character value, switch is the best tool to use. And the syntax of switch is the switch statement. Into brackets, you have the switch value. So this could be a variable that will bring either a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, or it's going to bring A, B, C, D. That's the character variable type. So this is supposed to hold any of these values. And then you have a case. So this could have been case 1. So the case label here could have been 1. Then case label here could have been 2. Another case could have been 3. Another case would have been 4 in that sequence. But you must also remember that for each case, you need to break. For each case, you need to break. And this could be a block of statements. So you can have curly braces, open and close. You have a lot of statements here. And then at the end of the statement, put a break. Okay. Then we say that if any of these cases do not match, then the default statement is executed. This is an example of how we can use the case. Okay. Look at this. Here we say month variable contains 2. Then we pass the month variable into our switch statement. We do our case. So if case 1, we say it's January, break. If case 2, we say it's February, break. Otherwise, we say not January or February. So we are just interested in identifying January and February. We don't care of the rest. So this variable at the moment contains 2. So 2 would have been passing here, and 2 would be compared against each of the case. In this case, this particular statement would have been executed, right? And the output would have been February. Another use of the switch statements. Let's say a day contains Saturday. So we pass Saturday here, as a string. Then case, Saturday. Case, Sunday. Then we echo out it is a weekend. We break. Then default, it is a weekday. So here this is trying to explain to you that you can have multiple cases that responds to the same answer. So here we just want to identify a weekend. And to identify a weekend, we need to test the day, whether the day coming is a Saturday or it is a Sunday. So if any of this, then this is going to be executed. Otherwise, we execute the default statement, which is it is a weekday. Remember, we could have also written this code to be like case Monday, case Tuesday, case Wednesday, all the way to Friday. Then we leave the default as a weekend. So any of these cases, then case Saturday, case Monday, case Tuesday, case Wednesday, then we would have put it is a weekday. Then we break it. Then you come to default and say it is a weekend. So we could write it the other way around. The next programming concept we are going to look at in PHP is arrays, how PHP handles arrays. Array hold multiple values in one variable. For example, if I want to store the ages of class 1 students, I will have one variable as age, and then I will store their ages in that particular one variable. So to do that, we use array. And in PHP, array consists of series of key value pairs. We can have index arrays, which use numbers for the keys, which is no different from the arrays we experience in Java, that is in 205. You can also have associative arrays, okay, which use strings for keys. So if you look at this side, this is an array which contains this data. So it contains these values. And the key is represented by numbers, starting from 0. So you have the minor bets is at location 0 in the array. This is also at location 2. The shins is located at location 2, sorry. And then you have the iron and Y also at key location 3. For the associative array, you also have text here and you have text there. So the difference is this one. Here the key is text and here the key is numbers, right? So, and then we'll see how these particular arrays are used. So let's look at this sample code. So here we are showing how we can access the array values. So we have an array called artist. If the array index is, if the array keys are values or numbers, then we can access it by just using the number. So position 0 of the array is going to go to band. So we are trying to access the value that we have stored in this particular location of the array. Now this is the associative array. In this particular statement, we are trying to echo out what is stored with the key value MD. So if you go back to this array, we see that Maryland is stored with the key value MD. So if I want to access Maryland, all that I need to do is to specify the array name state, and then I put my brackets and specify the key value, which is MD. Okay, so I hope that is clear. So to access the number value, we just specify the index. If you are specifying the associative, or if you are accessing the associative value, we just specify the key. How do we create an array? So we can just create our array in PHP by declaring the array variable with a square, and then we assign the value. So this one, for instance, will assign this value to index location 0. The next will assign this to index location 1 in that order. If we want to do it as associative array, we need to specify the key. So in this case, I specify the key fan, and I want to store Mel with the key fan. Here, I want to store Dave with the key fan, right? So what this means is that in this particular case, this fan here would have been replaced by this. So here, apple goes to location 2 of fruits. Orange goes to location 2 of fruit. So here, this will be replaced by that. How is this one represented in PHP? So for instance, the state array, you can also define the state array by using the array function and specify your key and specify the value, specify the key, and specify the value. So this will declare an array of states, associative array to be specific with key value pair, right? The same thing here. Also, we can use the range to be able to declare an array starting from 10 to 20 or starting from a specific number to another number. So this would have created an array of values starting from 10 to 20, stored in index 0, 1, 2, 3 in that order. Now, once you declare an array, which is supposed to be a contiguous data element, and you want to access them, it's normally very difficult to access them individually, particularly if you want to perform an action against all the data values. So the best way to do that is to use the for loop. Of course, if it is the numeric indexed array, we can just use the for loops, which is for i, for $i equals to 0 all the way to the end. So you do for $i, then I less than or equal to the array length, and then I++ to access the elements within the array. But if it is associative array, then it becomes very difficult to do that. So for associative array, we can easily use the for each to do that. So for each statement, it's used to access the content of the associative array. And the syntax is for each of the array variable as value. So each array variable at any instant of the loop will be represented by the value. So the value represents each array item, and as you go along, the value changes all the way to the end of the array. We can also use for each array as key, then value. So this would also be able to access the key and the value at the same time. The first array, we are just interested in the value. The second array, we are interested in the key value pair. We are interested in the key. At the same time, we are interested in the value. So if you want to have access to the key and the value, the second for each loop is the best construct to use. Otherwise, if you are interested in the array value, then the first for each loop is appropriate. And this is what you'll be using most of the time, because in most cases, programmers are just interested in the value that is stored in the array and not the key value pair. Yeah, this is a typical example of multidimensional array. Unfortunately, it's not clear on my screen, but this is a sample program I have written for you to handle multi-value array. That is array inside an array, and then you can copy this onto your PHP script, study it, and run it and see how it is implemented. But it is also possible to do two-dimensional, three-dimensional array using the array function of PHP. There are special arrays built into PHP. All are associative. For instance, the get, the post, and cookie are all in the special array of PHP. These are often also multidimensional arrays. Arrays whose elements values are also arrays. So in the PHP, you have all these arrays that are already built in. And mostly they are associative arrays that we can use. We'll be using a whole lot of them in our example programs. For example, using the post array variable that comes with PHP to validate our input. We shall be looking at the difference between the post and the get array variable. Okay, so in most cases, we use the post array variable to be able to grab data elements from our form that we use to interact with our PHP codes, either to push the data we supply, the data we enter on the form to the database, or we use it to validate whether the form has been filled or has been filled properly. So if you look at this code, we are using if condition to test the name field in our form to find out whether the name field is empty, or to find out whether the comment field is empty, or to find out whether the email field is empty. This thing, you understand it in much detail later, but just to demonstrate to you how we use some of the inbuilt arrays that are shipped with PHP. If we have an array variable, we can use these functions to perform a lot of activities around the array. So we can sort the array by using the sort function that is shipped with PHP. We can use the asort function that is shipped with pksort, rsort. There are different types of sorting that we can use to sort our array, which we have declared. Let's look at arrays and strings. This is very, very important, particularly if you are dealing with files. If you are reading data from a file, for instance, your data from a file, a record, will usually be separated by space or by comma or by any other character, which really used to delimit the data items within the data file. So for instance, you want to store user data in a file. In the file, you will store it as user ID, comma, user password, comma, username, comma, first name, last name of the user, role of the user. These are data items you will store as records on your file. And each of these data items will be separated by a character, usually a space or a comma. And this particular explode and implode tool comes in handy here because you want to be able to have access to individual data on the file. So if you read a record, the record will come as a stream of one string made up of the user ID, the username, password as one string. But you want to be able to have access to the user ID as a data. You want to have access to the user password as a data. You want to have access to the username as a data. Now to do this thing, the best way you can do that is to use the explode. Okay? So the explode would have taken the data and then explode it, separate it into an array that is supposed to that is supposed to give you access to individual data items within the string that you have read. The same thing, you can insert items into a string using the implode function. So these are very useful functions that we use to really create an array from strings. Okay, so this has brought us to the end of session 1B of the lectures. You can read on the topics from the references indicated for more and detailed understanding. Thank you very much, and see you next time.